You're doing well. Welcome to another Smart Silver Stacker live stream. Now, thank you very much for tuning in. If you are joining, I do really appreciate everybody who tunes into these live streams and watches. I know there's several of you who catch the majority of them because I see in the chat. So, just want to say a big thank you before we get started today to everybody who does that. If you are new to the channel, please do click that subscribe button and the bell notification. And if you're hopping in here, click that like button, that thumbs up, smash that. Go ahead and help get this information out into the algorithm. Now, there are several developments that I want to cover and weigh in on today, including the debt deal, which has just passed Congress, and it's looking very likely the president is going to sign that into law. But first, we have got the metals. So let's take a look at the precious metals here because they're back in the red today. Now, it's not a huge pullback that we're seeing in gold and silver. We've got gold here at $1,960, down about 1%. Silver also down just under 1%, so not a huge correction. However, their upward momentum has been halted here. Now, what does this have to do with? Is this the debt deal? I mean, you would think if the government has just agreed to go deeper into debt that would be good for the metals, and I think in the long run it probably will be. But this reaction that we are seeing in the metals here has to do largely with the non-farm payroll numbers which came out today. Now, those came out better than expected. Again, I don't think we can really read too much into these numbers. I mean, typically they're adding jobs. If they are adding jobs in low-paying service sector areas, they're probably cooked anyway. I mean, these things always seem to get, revised after the fact. There's a lot of manipulation of these numbers, just like with the CPI and the inflation numbers. So I wouldn't worry too much about this pullback. It's probably a good day to be stacking, honestly. However, this jobs report that we got today, it seems to have thrown a bit of cold water on the market's notion that we're going to get a Fed rate hike pause in June. So we're going to take a look at some of those numbers as well. Now, SD Bullion, sponsor of the channel, don't forget you can check them out. You can buy your gold and silver at SD Bullion. Right now, new customers can get their gold or silver at spot by visiting sdbullion.com/new. So make sure you check that out if you are new to stacking. And I do want to take a look at this CME FedWatch tool. Now, this is the likelihood of different Fed actions at the next June FOMC meeting. Now, this number here on the left, it's still a large number, 63%. Still seems like the majority of the market believes that the Fed is going to pause their rate hikes in June, and then who knows after that. I mean, we might get a resumption of rate hikes later in the summer, but now, following that jobs report, this number has come down. If you recall, I showed this, I think it was either yesterday or day before, and about 77% of market participants were expecting a pause. So that number has come down quite a bit, although there's still some significant uncertainty there. But, one thing that we can take away from this is that what is driving the metals markets and markets in general here is still just the anticipation of what the Fed is going to do next, and that the price setting mechanism in these markets has been completely subverted here. Again, that's why I view these low prices for gold and silver as a big opportunity. It's not financial advice, of course. I'm just kind of telling you what I'm doing. I'm thinking of picking up some of those freedom rounds that SD Bullion has on sale right now. Generic rounds, I think they're as low as $2.99 over spot, so that's not a bad deal. I might pick some of those up this weekend. We shall see. And I see some folks chiming in the chat there. Hello, thank you. If you're just tuning in, please do smash that like button. Feel free to say hello in the chat. If there's anything you'd like me to cover or dip into, I will go ahead and do that. If you put it in the chat, happy to answer any questions or, just cover any topics that you're interested in. But we do have some interesting stuff to get into today. Eventually, the Fed is driving markets at this point. It's the anticipation of a Fed pause or more rate hikes. It's really all that's driving the action in markets these days. But eventually, these markets and the market participants, because, the markets are really just a sum of all of the participants. It's an aggregate. Eventually, they're going to come to the realization that the Fed is in a hopeless position here and that they are, at some point, going to be forced to choose between their fight against inflation and bailing out this teetering economy. But that being said, I mean, that's all stuff we've covered before. I want to move on to this debt ceiling deal because despite all of the economic data which has come out over the past couple of days, this really seems to be in the spotlight. Excuse me. And I think it's rather important to examine because it kind of gives us an idea of where things are going to be moving going forward. So last night, the Senate passed this bill. It's on its way to the president's desk. I'm sure it will be signed there, especially when we take a look at what the president had to say. So I'm going to go ahead and read a excerpt from his statement here. The president saying, "Tonight, senators from both parties voted to protect the hard-earned economic progress we have made and prevent a first-ever default by the United States. Our work is far from finished, but this agreement is a critical step forward and a reminder of what's possible when we act in the best interests of our country." All right, so I do want to comment on that. I'm going to go to the chat here real quick. Let's see. Will the government seize our PMs? I'm sorry, I missed the tail end of that chat. Okay, will they seize our PMs if we go into a national crisis? What do you think? I feel like it'll happen because the government wants to remove our safety nets. Well, it's possible. I mean, I do think that if we get some kind of a hyperinflationary collapse or a currency crisis, which, after seeing this debt deal, where they've really done very little to curb the spending, I think it's more and more likely. It's still, kind of a low probability event to occur at any given time, but we're headed in that direction. They very well may move to seize precious metals. I mean, it's possible. I wouldn't rule it out. I will say that I think the logistics of such an enterprise actually favors the stackers. So take that for what you will, but yeah, I could see them demonizing stackers. We're greedy people who've been hoarding precious metals. I mean, they don't pay any attention to it now. But yeah, I mean, if the price of precious metals drastically goes up, if inflation runs out of control, sure, they might come to try to get your metals. How do you avoid that? Well, I don't know. I'll leave that up to you. I certainly wouldn't advocate, violating any rules or regulations or anything like that. But I don't know. I mean, metals are metals. They're in your own custody. Maybe you lose them in a boating accident. I don't know. I mean, it could happen. If that happens, I mean, how would they seize them, right? Because you would have already lost them. I don't know. But it's not something I'm particularly concerned about because here's the thing. I mean, yeah, they could seize your precious metals, but if you're holding assets in a bank account or in a stock exchange, they can seize those assets just as easily. I mean, just look at bail-ins. Or they can just seize your purchasing power with the fiat currency via inflation. I mean, they don't really even need to officially seize anything. So, I mean, they can always try to take whatever you want. But the thing is that something like a bank account can be seized. You can wake up one morning and it's gone. But your silver, it's in your custody. So at least if it gets seized, you're going to be aware of it. And you might have some kind of a say in that. That's all I'll really say on that. But so this deal here, the president saying that this avoided a first ever default by the United States. I want to comment on that and say, even if the U.S. were to default on its debt, it wouldn't really be a first ever kind of event. I mean, even in living memory, just think about in 1971, we had the Bretton Woods Agreement where the dollar was supposed to be convertible into gold. The U.S. kind of defaulted on that obligation, right? I mean, Richard Nixon temporarily ended convertibility of the dollar into gold. But here we are 52 years later, and guess what? Dollar's still not convertible into gold. So for a temporary suspension, that's gone on for some time. So we defaulted on that obligation. So, I mean, to say that the U.S. has never defaulted is not entirely accurate. And this idea of avoiding a default by borrowing more money, I mean, what we're doing here with this debt deal is we're basically saying, well, we can only pay off the people that we owe money to if we borrow more money. So basically, this whole thing is a Ponzi scheme. I mean, that basically fits the definition of a Ponzi scheme. What's a Ponzi scheme, right? It's an investment scheme where you have to continue attracting more investors to pay off the original ones. And eventually, it all collapses. And that's the direction we're heading in here. But according to the president and many of our elected representatives, I don't want to pin the blame exclusively on him. I mean, he's barely there anyway, so someone's pulling the strings there. And it's really both parties that are complicit here. The outcome of, I guess, paying off all of your debt with devalued currency by borrowing is a better outcome than an honest default. I mean, we'll see. I suspect that we're headed for a default of another type. That's one in which, yes, we will pay all of our obligations, but we're going to pay them in currency with no purchasing power. And at the end of the day, what's the difference between not getting paid back and getting paid back with worthless paper notes that don't buy anything? I mean, it's a distinction without a difference. It doesn't really make any difference if you default by not paying people back or you just print a bunch of money to pay them back, because it's the end result is the same. It's kind of like what Alan Greenspan told us, I think it was in 2005, so some time ago now, that he warned us in congressional testimony that our system is just one that moves cash around. It doesn't really pay anything, and that we can guarantee benefits. I mean, he was referring specifically to Social Security, but this applies across the board. We have a system where, we can guarantee cash payments, but we can't guarantee their purchasing power. Now, this agreement, by the way, this doesn't even raise the debt ceiling, if I'm clear on the specifics here. I mean, I haven't spent too much time diving into it, but what it looks like it does is it just suspends the debt ceiling until sometime in the year 2025. So it gets us past the next election, which is, that's always what these politicians are looking for. They're just looking to get reelected. They're looking for very short-term solutions. And, when this deal expires in 2025, we're just going to see more political theater regarding the debt ceiling, very likely. Of course, that's assuming that, we've avoided World War III and full-on economic collapse and hyperinflation by then, which I don't think is guaranteed. It's only 2 years away, but, as we've witnessed over the past couple years, a lot can happen in that time span. And the way things are going, they seem to be devolving faster and faster. And, I don't want to toot my own horn or anything here, because honestly, this outcome, is fairly predictable, fairly obvious that this is what was going to happen. But this is exactly what I forecast would happen moving up to this date. I said we'd get a lot of political theater, check. Both sides can save some face by putting on a show of opposing the rampant, out-of-control federal spending, check, we got that. But then at the last minute, we get a deal which essentially does almost nothing to rein in the spending. I'm going to go to the chat here. Someone says the U.S. could cripple China with a debt default. Well, yeah, the global economy is, quite intertwined. We're dependent on them. They're dependent on us. The same could be said about them. I mean, if they dumped their $860 billion worth of U.S. treasuries all at once, I mean, that would put us in a huge hurt too. One thing that they have done, the Chinese that is they've done a very good job of securing access to commodities. They've got these deals now with Qatar, where they're getting 27-year natural gas supply. They've got all this oil and gas coming in from Russia. They're the number one purchasers of oil from the Saudis. They're dealing with the French now and buying natural gas in yuan. So the Chinese have really set themselves up here where even if they go through a financial crisis, they will still have the essential commodities that they need to survive. And so, yeah, we could damage their economy if we defaulted, but I mean, it would be just as bad for us, if not worse. Because remember, we're the ones who are accustomed to living above our means and having the rest of the world foot the bill for it, So if we were to default, that would come to a immediate end. And I think that's coming to an end anyway. But, it might come a lot faster if we see this geopolitical situation break down. That's a fact. Now, this deal, I mean, basically it gives us some token spending freezes. I'm sure that somehow the politicians will find a way around those, by the way. I mean, spending is very likely going to continue to grow more or less unabated. And one thing that this deal notably doesn't even touch is defense spending. Gordy says, nice Engelhand bar. Did you ever think of becoming a hand model? Well, that's kind of what I am on this channel, right? I'm sure you guys all tune in to see my lovely calloused hands here. Yeah, I get that comment a lot. You're not the first person to make that joke, by the way. It still makes me laugh, though. So anyway, who are the real winners here? Well, the military-industrial complex, of course, they're going to continue to rake in massive profits as we move closer to this World War III scenario around the world. And eventually, I think that the precious metals too, I think that they're going to benefit. They're going to, in the long run, be a beneficiary, at least in nominal terms, of this kind of deal, because this deal all but guarantees a return to quantitative easing and massive inflationary fiscal policy moving forward from this point on. Now, eventually, all of this spending, and the need for the US Treasury to raise all of these funds and to sell all of this debt, it's going to force the Fed to reprise its role as the buyer of last resort for that debt. And that's when quantitative tightening is going to come to an end and QE is going to rear its head, probably in a very big way. That's my forecast anyway. I'm glad I got this QE round, by the way. You'll probably be seeing this pop up in videos for when I talk about QE. I can pick up this QE Infinity round. Picked this up from SD Bullion recently. It's the Awakening series. Very cool silver round. So glad to have picked that up. I think it'll come in handy as a prop for the channel here. Let me know what you think. Also, before we continue here in this live stream, curious, what do you guys think about this format here where I've got some, bullion and I got this tablet here? It's not as polished looking, I guess, as the more produced videos, but I think it gets the point across. But let me know in the chat what you think about this format. Do you prefer this to the regular, shorter, more kind of condensed, produced videos, or do you like these live streams? Because, I make these videos for you, not for me. I'm going to close this ad here on the tablet. There we go. That was driving me nuts. But I make these videos for you, so I'm in the business of making the format that you like the most. I'm just curious, because this is something I've recently started doing. Snake coin is fire. Yeah, it's pretty cool. The two snakes eating themselves. Thank you very much, everybody who's in the live stream, by the way. Great current format. Okay, cool. Great. I'll stick with it then. All right. Now, speaking of the Treasury scrambling for cash here, because, their cash levels have come very low. I want to move on to this next story here. We've got the Treasury auctioning one-day Treasury notes. Fairly interesting. Now, these have a yield of 6.15%. So fairly high, and the Treasury, they've got to raise funds because they keep spending all this money. They've got regular payments that just have to go out, things like Social Security, Medicare, all that stuff, and their cash balance has gotten very low, so they're having to sell these. And to give you an idea of the kind of dire straits that they're in, there have only been 6 occasions over the past 25 years in which the Treasury has been forced to auction these one-day Treasury notes. So kind of an unusual occurrence, and it just gives you an idea of how tight things have gotten. And because the cash levels have gotten so low at the Treasury, they are going to need to sell massive amounts of debt throughout the rest of this year to finance all the spending. It's exactly what we were referencing earlier this week in a live stream. I touched on how there was a forecast that they would need to sell, I think, over $1 trillion worth of bonds by the end of Q3 2023. So we are in for a lot of spending and a lot of debt and a lot of money creation probably throughout the rest of this year. Now, before we go any further, I do want to say a thank you to Silver Botanicals, channel sponsor, awesome company. They've got personal hygiene products, household products that are powered by nano silver. You can check them out with the link down in the description. You can use coupon code STACKER to save 10% on your order. Yeah, I've got somebody who says in the chat here, a one-day Treasury notes, it's RS is saying this. That's like Weimar Republic kind of stuff. Yeah, we're going to see a lot more Weimar Republic kind of stuff as time progresses. Now, this is a story from Cross Border Capital. This is on Kitco, calling for $3,000 gold. I covered this earlier this week in a live stream, but there was a point that I wanted to touch on in it that I failed to mention. It's a live stream. Sometimes I leave stuff out. And I finished the end of the video, and I think, oh man, I wanted to mention this. So I'm going to read this portion of their statement here, and then I just want to comment on it real quick. They said, the analysts over there said, we are moving into a new era where central banks may have no choice but to create monetary inflations to fund future structural fiscal deficits. These deficits, in turn, result from escalating mandatory spending demands and tax bases ravaged by new technologies and the changing mix of the labor force. At the same time, the luxury of being able to co-opt foreign savings to help domestic funding looks less likely given the growing geopolitical tensions. In short, we face a world of permanent QE and secular monetary inflation. Now, I did touch in that previous live stream on a few things about these structural deficits, all these unfunded liabilities that we have that we are just going to have to continue making payments on. It looks like Social Security, Medicare, defense spending, these various government entitlement programs. They're all, what they call the third rail of U.S. politics. Um, the third rail there, it's a reference to the rail for trains that is electrified. If you touch it, you die. And that's basically what all of these issues are. If any politician in the U.S. tries to cut the spending for these programs, they don't have a chance of getting reelected. Their political career will be dead in the water. Um, and somebody in the chat here saying stuff for Canadian viewers would be great. All right, if I see anything coming up for Canadian viewers, I'll let you know. Um, the other thing here was that we wouldn't be able to outsource our inflation and debt. That's true. Foreign buyers are much likely to absorb all of these treasuries. That is courtesy and thanks to the weaponization of the US dollar, the deteriorating geopolitical situation. Yesterday, I did the World War III update. Things are just continuing to get worse and worse. There's a security conference right now that's kicking off, I think in Singapore, and the Chinese have refused to have a meeting between their defense secretary and ours. So chilling of the relationship there without a doubt. It's very likely that Saudi Arabia, they're not going to be recycling their petrodollar profits into U.S. treasuries for much longer. In fact, the petrodollar is very likely to be a thing of the past in the near future. But the part that I left out here was that comment they made about a workforce and a tax base that is gutted. So that's very important because, while spending is continuing to balloon here in the rest of the world, they're not going to be helping us out buying U.S. debt. The bit about the tax base is very interesting, I think. And what they're referencing there, I believe, is the advent of artificial intelligence, AI, which is likely going to, put a lot of people out of work. Now, in a free market, I don't think that would really be much of a problem because, people get laid off because of technology. In the short term, it could be a bit of a problem, but then, they'll find other ways to put their labor to use productively. And this is how technological progress has always worked historically, more or less. We all used to be subsistence farmers. You go far enough back, and technological progress had allowed a much smaller number of people to feed the population. So it wasn't like the economy collapsed because everybody wasn't employed farming anymore. They just, are free to go on to do things like get jobs as computer programmers or artists or doctors. Or, you can be a hand model and make YouTube videos. You get the idea. But the problem here is twofold. One, I suppose, AI could be a little different this time as opposed to those other technological advances. Time will tell. But here's the thing. It will hurt the tax base because those unemployed workers, if they're laid off because they get replaced with AI, they're not going to be paying income taxes anymore. And so this could make the deficit problem even worse because we're going to see tax receipts shrink. Now, perhaps businesses will have, higher profits that might help to compensate for that. But generally speaking, the AI is going to damage the tax base because a lot of taxes get, taken in as part of the income tax. So less people employed means less income tax collected. But the other thing is, if this time around, if a lot of people lose their jobs, are they going to be receiving enhanced unemployment benefits? This could be a real issue. I mean, just look at what happened in 2020. We saw a lot of jobs that got lost. And what happened? Well, I mean, basically, the government paid everybody not to work rather than encouraging those people to go find, other ways to add productively to the economy. So the free market was circumvented by government unemployment programs. That unleashed a tremendous amount of inflation, but I have a sinking suspicion that perhaps, the powers to be have not learned their lesson from that. I would not be shocked if we see a lot of layoffs because of AI over the next couple years. I mean, maybe we're just going to see UBI, Universal Basic Income. I mean, this could all tie together with the release of a central bank digital currency. I mean, that's kind of beyond the scope of what I'm going to cover in today's video, just kind of speculative, but that's a real thing. And, speaking of AI run amok, I do kind of want to finish this on, I don't know, a lighter note. I don't know if you'd call it a lighter note, maybe a more ominous note, really, depending on your perspective. But I thought this was just an interesting story. So, kind of moving away from the economy a bit, we had this report that went viral. It was going around. This U.S. Air Force colonel was commenting about a test that was done, or an exercise, a simulation in which a AI controlled drone was tasked with destroying enemy air defense systems. And the way they had this thing programmed, it was working on a point based reward system. And the idea was that, the drone identifies these systems that it's supposed to destroy. It has to get approval from a human operator. When the human operator gives approval, it blows up the enemy SAM sites, surface to air missiles, what have you. Um, at some point, according to this colonel in this simulation of this exercise, he said that the human operator denied the drone's request, and the drone turned on the operator because it thought, hey, you're getting in the way of me getting points, and killed the operator. And not that it actually killed anybody, this is what happened in a simulation. And then later, when it was programmed not to do that, you lose points if you blow up your operator. It instead blew up a communications tower, which facilitated communication between the drone and the human operator, saying, "Well, if I can't kill the human, I'm going to blow up the comm tower to stop myself from losing points." Now, this story here, this is all getting retracted. Okay, the Air Force is saying, "Yeah, my fact checker act says that's false news." Well, he's coming in and saying, "Well, this was really more of a thought experiment at this point." It didn't really happen, And I mean, according to the original story, it wasn't like the drone was actually killing anybody. He was just saying in an exercise that this happened. But they're doing some damage control on this. I don't know if it's true or not. I mean, maybe it was. He's saying he misspoke. He was describing this experiment. The colonel misspoke. I don't know how you can really misspeak about this, but this report went viral. And so now the Air Force is saying no such experiment took place. This was all just a thought experiment. Now, I don't know. I mean, again, this is just kind of an interesting story. In the comments here, someone says my fact checker app is AI. Yeah, you got AI checking stories about AI. Maybe there's a broader agenda, but I just thought this was interesting. It kind of just makes you think about the variety of threats that our society and our species is facing these days. I mean, this is stuff that would have boggled the imagination of people of previous generations. But the list is growing. We've got potential economic collapse, potential inflation, potentially our jobs being lost to AI, and maybe the AI will just turn on us, Terminator, Skynet style. But really, the takeaway here, I mean, there's nothing we can do about AI. If you're like me, I mean, AI is way over my head. I'm not smart enough to even really comprehend how this stuff works in any meaningful way, let alone get down into the nitty gritty of it. But I think the takeaway here is that we just need to be getting prepared. We've got this window of time to prepare for what is coming, and we just have to take it. We have to make the most of it. We are facing a lot of problems geopolitically, economically, scientifically. As bad as things are right now for some folks, uh, you know, these are the good times, right? So we need to keep that in mind, and we need to make the most of them, and we also need to just be doing what we can to get prepared. So, get your hard assets, get your gold and silver before the QE Infinity kicks off, because that is likely coming, and learn important skills, get your other basic necessities squared away, as James Wesley Rawls says, your beans, bullets, and band-aids. Get some food, get what you need, because tough times are coming, whether it be because of a rogue AI or whether it just be because of our own leaders' economic stupidity. Hard to say what is going to be the end game here. But that's it for today. Please stay safe and happy stacking, everybody. Leave me a comment down below to let me know what you think. And I do really appreciate all of you for watching. So thank you so much for tuning into this and all these other live streams we've been doing. You're a great audience. I appreciate all of you. All those stackers out there, we've got a great community, and I think we're going to make it, whatever comes our way. So yeah, Knicks fan 1992 there says, smart silver stacker out. You stole my line, but that's it. Stay safe and happy stacking, everybody. I will catch you next time. Smart silver stacker